Mrs. Rouhieh McComb.
I feel very honored to be invited here to the city of the covenant, the city of Abdu'l-Bahá. Abdu'l-Bahá influenced my life before I was born. And then when he came to America, I had the honor and privilege of meeting him. I hope you'll forgive my being personal, because this is a story of a little girl. And I'm going to bring out some of our family secrets. It was so wonderful to meet Abdu'l-Bahá, to experience his generosity, his loving kindness. He just seemed as if he had his arms outstretched to everyone and drawing them all to him. He had a very vibrant personality. I wouldn't say it was hypnotic, but I would say it was vibrant, perhaps magnetic. He seemed to be vitally alive, always with great vigor and strength. He seemed to, although he was elderly, he seemed to have great strength. And so we recall those days with great joy. He had several titles. He liked the title of the servant of God. He served his father all his life, and he served humanity. He was the center of the covenant. He was the interpreter of the books. He was the master. Even Baha'u'llah called him the master. He had mastered the Baha'i way of life. He was our exemplar. Whenever we want to know how to act, we always look back to see how Abdu'l-Bahá acted. And so many of the friends called him the beloved. But in the unfoldment of religion, there has never been as unusual a personage. He was unique. He was the mystery of God.
I was in Cairo walking up the great steps of the Imperial Hotel, the British Hotel. Many steps going up and very broad as the front of the whole hotel. And halfway up the steps, whom should I run into but Rouhieh, the angel of the cars, whom I had known before when I was still studying at Harvard for a year. Standwood Cobb, what are you doing here? Well, I said, I'm sightseeing. Well, come with me to visit Abdu'l-Bahá. Well, I can't. He wrote it wasn't possible. He said, I have permission to take anybody. Standing permission. Come with me.
Now, I was born into a Baha'i family. My parents
Mr.
were
Don
Baha'is
Kinney.
way back in 1896. And that seems an awful long time ago. But I was born in 1911, February the 18th, and I had the wonderful pleasure of being in the presence of Abdu'l-Bahá in 1912 when he was here.
He didn't smile at you, grin at you the way some people would say a prominent person had noticed them. But he treated everybody exactly the same.
Mrs. Louise Sayward in the morning. What was the greatest lesson that you learned from Abdu'l-Bahá, you feel?
There were so many. I can't pick out one.
And later that afternoon.
I really do.
Master revealed a tablet for you. Who told you that? Well, my birthday. He sent a letter to my father. Congratulations and praying for me and asking him to name me on the name of my grandfather, who was also persecuted in the faith. So my name, Abdu'l Yazdi, is basically the name of my grandfather, who is mentioned in the memorial of the faith. So he said, leave him his name and serve the faith. That's not right.
Rouhieh Yazdi, and his guest, Mr. Rashid Hashemi, who met Abdu'l-Bahá briefly in 1920. Abdu'l-Bahá, son of the Prophet founder of the Bahá'í faith, Baha'u'llah, lived between 1844 and 1921. He suffered more than 50 years of imprisonment and exile for his religious convictions. After 1908, these following people met Abdu'l-Bahá, subsequent to his release from the prison city of Akka, Palestine.
And here I am on the steps with my mother. And she had told me about Abdu'l-Bahá and about God. And I went to her one day and I said, "Will you write a letter to God for me?" And I found in her notes that I said this. She said she took it down in my baby way, as I told her. "My dear, dear God, I haven't seen you for a long, long time. Come and see me for 2 days again." I don't know where I got the 2 days. "I am not a good little girl, but I want you to make me good. I saw God when I was a little round ball, when he put me in the ground to grow, and I was there for 2 days." My mother said that she would send this letter to Abdu'l-Bahá, and he would give it to God for me. The maidservant of God, Musette Montana Jones, must pray at the threshold of God and say, "O thou God, I am a child. Train me under the shade of thy providence. I am a new flower. Water me by the downpour of the cloud of thy mercy. I am a plant of the orchard of thy love. Make me a fruitful tree. Thou art the mighty and the powerful, and thou art the kind, the wise, and the seer." Abdu'l-Bahá Abbas. It's such a miracle that Abdu'l-Bahá came to this country to awaken the Friends, to serve him, to serve the cause of God, to deliver the greatest message the world has ever known. And yet he took care of the little needs and the little desires of a small child. But he sat on a bench on Riverside Drive, and this picture was taken. Now, there was a policeman there. There were some children there, too, and there's especially a policeman. And he looked at me and he said, "Ah, you're on the good side of Santa Claus." They didn't know what a wonderful Santa Claus he was. They didn't know that every Friday, I think it was, that he used to have long lines of poor people at his gate, and he would distribute various things that they needed. He seemed to know just what each person needed. So he was a real Santa Claus. We went out to this park, Lincoln Park. We sat on the stone benches around this monument. And my mother and sister said, "We'll say our prayers. Maybe we'll see the Master again." And I said the little prayer that he had revealed for me when I was 4 years old. You remember I asked to be a good little girl? It wasn't long before Abdu'l-Bahá appeared across the grass and turned directly towards us. I ran to meet the Master. He looked down into my face and asked me my name, and then he said, "Are you a good little girl?" And I said, "Yes." So he took my hand, and we walked in the park together. The friends like this picture because it's rather symbolic. He's leading me to the light. My mother told me to look into his eyes. She said they're like deep wells. And so they were. There was a light rim. They were blue-gray, with little flecks of hazel, I believe. And there was a light rim around the iris, and then the color deepened towards the pupil. So they looked like deep wells. If man lives up to these divine commandments, this world of earth shall be transformed into the world of heaven, and this material sphere shall be converted into a paradise of glory. It is my hope that you shall be rendered successful therein, so that you may cast light upon the world of humanity like unto lamps, and quicken and stir the body of existence like unto a spirit. This is eternal glory. This is everlasting felicity. This is immortal life. This is heavenly loftiness. This is being created in the image and likeness of God. And unto this I call you. And I pray to God to strengthen and bless you.
So off we go from Port Said to Haifa, and then we reach Akka. You must realize that after 2 years of imprisonment in Akka, the Holy Family was put into comfortable lodgings, ample. Here was 3 of us having separate rooms, and perfect comfort of a home of wealth in the East. So we come to his room, a long drawing room with French windows at the corner, letting in light, and a desk and chair. Now, at first I saw only light in that corner, but as I looked, there was Abdu'l-Bahá sitting there. Others had the same experience. Now, when Louis got up to him, she fell on her knees, picked up his robe and put it to her lips. Well, it embarrassed me. Why? Well, I couldn't sincerely do that. And I knew that he wouldn't do it, just took out my hand and said, "How do you do, Abdu'l-Bahá?" Well, he knew what was going on. He solved the problem very easily by just opening his arms and embracing me. That's my first meeting, no shaking hands. People from India, Hindus, always seemed exotic. Now, Abdu'l-Bahá did not seem exotic. Meditate on that. He wasn't exotic. He was cosmic. Huh? He wasn't exotic. And Abdu'l-Bahá was asked for something. Abdu'l-Bahá, do you know everything? He smiled and said, "No, I don't know everything. But when I need to know anything, it's revealed." Now, that's the mind of light. Now, as for other meetings, he invited me to bring my father to meet him in Boston. And to my amazement, father proceeded to lecture to him. And he became an audience for half an hour. Can you imagine anywhere in the world a great soul listening to the visitor? Huh? Oh, it's too good to be true. He was an example of that humility which he preached, you see. He said, people will say, "Well, I'll endure that man as long as he's endurable." That sounds reasonable, doesn't it? He said, "Well, anyone can endure people as long as they're endurable. Baha'is must endure people when they're unendurable." But he didn't say this looking sad as a clergyman would say, "But we must endure people when they're unendurable." He said it with a smile, as much as say, try it, it's great fun. Someone asked to describe Abdu'l-Bahá, they said it's impossible. He never was the same. How can you describe? Describe weather in one word. Well, but weather's different. This is important. He called me in Washington to say goodbye when he finally left this country. And he embraced me, and he said, he lifted his hand and said 3 times, be on fire with the love of God. Be on fire with the love of God. Be on fire with the love of God. That's Abdu'l-Bahá.
At the Kinney's house in the afternoon, we went to the steamer, all the Bahá'ís, but he would not permit a crowd greeting him and asked us to go to the Kinneys that afternoon where he would receive us. So we all left the pier and went in the afternoon. And I can remember still this quite large room, people sitting in sort of a circle. And you could almost feel this because none of us had an idea what we were going to see. And the door he was coming into the room was over there. And we were staring there, and suddenly the door opened, and in comes Abdu'l-Bahá with his typical gesture. Are you happy? Welcome, welcome. Abdu'l-Bahá had a great sense of humor and a wonderful, mellow, deep laugh that was just a joy to hear. And it was just like being perfectly happy, content. You'd never think of trouble or worries or anything. You were just absolutely happy when you were near him. He had been at our house to talk to some of our friends, and after tea, when he was going home, I was picked to drive with him in the cab and see that he got safely home. And of course, 1 or 2 secretaries, but they sat in with the driver's seat. I was alone in the cab with Abdu'l-Bahá across New York City. And what a wonderful feeling it was, although we didn't exchange a word. And he sat, which he often did, looking off in space, as though he could see in the beyond what he wanted to know. You had that feeling so distinctly.
Could you tell us the story of how your father wanted to throw Abdu'l-Bahá out of the house?
Well, my father had been very objectionable to the faith. He was really an atheist. And when my stepmother became interested in the Bahá'í faith, he got frightfully angry. He used to argue, he used to throw the books, And amongst other things, he said, if that old man comes in this house, I will throw him out. Have the janitor throw him out. Instead of which, he was home with my stepmother, my brother, and myself. We stood waiting for the door to open when he arrived. And instead of that, he was the most courteous man. He was warm. Abdu'l-Bahá walked right across the room to him and said, "Doctor, are you happy?" And that was a question he used often. And my father wilted just like a bird that's sunning itself with its wings down. He was so touched by the warmth that Abdu'l-Bahá made him feel, and the sincerity, because he said all along he didn't believe anybody could be that way.
How did you feel about him leaving?
Well, all the Bahá'ís in New York and in the vicinity went down to the steamer to say goodbye to him. And he would show us in the main salon, and many people had sent him flowers, and he gave everybody a goodbye shake of the hand plus a flower. And we left just feeling, well, it's all over. I mean, you have no words to express the loss it was going to be, because most of us felt we'd never see him again. And we lose perhaps some of the beauty that we had contacted. Most people had dashed to the end of the pier so that they'd see the last of him as he drew out. But I didn't feel that way. I stayed where I could see him to the last minute, as close practically as you are to me now. And I saw, which was one of the most moving memories I have, as his secretaries who were staying in this country. He was leaving several who had traveled with him as interpreters, and I saw them kneel at his feet, and he put his arms around each one, and you could feel the strength and warmth he was giving them so that they could go on without him. Well, I'm very thankful that I've been able to share a little bit of what the joy of those days were.
You have.
Very much.
I mean, even if you weren't with him that afternoon or morning, the spirit stayed with you.
I met him in 1910 and 1912. And in 1990, 41 of night, used to meet him every night in the public meetings, in the breakfast. And all the thing I can say about meeting Abdu'l-Bahá is something which cannot be neither described nor transmitted. It's a feeling that the person feels in himself, the joy and the happiness, and being thankful to God that He created such a period of the world. But to transmit what's Abdu'l-Bahá and what is my feeling for Abdu'l-Bahá cannot be transferred. It's just a matter of love. Different kind of love. But his presence by himself meant a lot to everybody, not only me. I can relate a small story which I stated before this. By mere chance, I was sitting in a hotel, big hotel. The lobby of that hotel. There were all the ministers of Egypt, the southern resort, because they couldn't leave in 1942 during the war situation. Even the Queen of Egypt was there. And by mere chance, there was the Minister of Education and the other ministers. And then suddenly he said, "You're a Baha'i?" I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Well, I met Abbas Effendi, 1912 in Alexandria." So the only question I had to ask him is, what impression did you have when you met him? He kept it 2 seconds quiet, and then he said, looking into his eyes, I could see that if ever the world would be in need of another prophet, then it's him. So that's what the influence of Abdu'l-Bahá when he came, when you meet somebody. We were 18 years in Egypt, and we were unable, my ancestors, to do much as usual. When Abdu'l-Bahá came, we saw the then, through his visit, not through his talks, the way he acted, the way he walked, the way he treated people. That's what he taught the Baha'i Christians, by his deeds, by his actions. But as the minister said, through his eyes I could tell if the world is in need of a new prophet, it's him. That's not easy. So that's how the reflection about Baha'i, his personality.
His eyes were what color?
And believe it or not, I kept on looking at them for hours and days and nights. Never could get the colors. Neither is not the God, but under the beautiful eyes. Because there's not too much in them, you get dizzy.
Was there anything that really attracted you about him?
And the spirituality affected me a lot because I never saw a person like him before. Yeah, it was something different. Yeah.
By spirituality, you mean the way his mannerisms?
That's right. His manner, the way he speaks, the way he treats people, the way many times we were sitting and many mullahs, muftis from Palestine, they came to ask him questions. And he was answering them in a way nobody could understand, nobody could think of. You see, it was something extra.
You spoke about that picture there. I was asking about the photograph.
Yeah.
And what you looked at.
Well, this I know, as far as my knowledge, is that whenever he was in a good humor, sense of humor, and happy news he had, he put his turbans back. And when he put them up on his eyebrows, that means he's stopped. And when he puts normal, that means he's normal. So when I found this picture, I got a photograph, a reproduction of it and keep it. Whenever I feel sad, I just look at it for a few minutes and feel happy.
The memories of meeting Abdu'l-Bahá were so vivid that I think that the Baha'is telling stories to us constantly of what went on made us remember all the episodes, because I personally can close my eyes and see Abdu'l-Bahá, how I used to play under his robes, how I used to be bounced on his lap, how while I was playing under his robe I'd stick my head out and he would take his handkerchief around his neck and he would hit me on the head with it. Now when Abdu'l-Bahá came into our home, and when he had the picture taken for $35 and all this sort of thing, he took over all the expenses of our home, the whole thing. He paid the servants. He would not let my father was a wealthy man at that time. He paid the servants, he paid everything. So he wasn't a tall person, he was around 5'7". But he looked heavy, But from the records that I have of Krug and some of the doctors and things that had examined Abdu'l-Bahá, he was a very slim man, but he used to have these things that they wrap around him, you know, and those little pantaloons they put on and everything, because it made the Persian people look heavy. But Abdu'l-Bahá was not heavy. I know my mother used to bathe Abdu'l-Bahā's feet every night, and she used to see these terrible scars from the chains that he had wrapped around his feet when he was in prison with his father, Baha'u'llah. And Mother said she used to start to weep. And Rouhieh McComb, who was older than I, who was 7 years older, or 7 years of age, I mean. Was it 8? You know, I guess she was 8 years old. Remembers those, because she remembers my mother bathing his feet, and she could see these chain scars all over. Don't forget, he spent almost 40 years of his life with Baha'u'llah in jail, or in prison. Oh yes, there's Abdu'l-Bahá, and while he was in our home, always used to go, what we thought was for a rest, between the hours of 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And nobody would disturb the master at that time. And my father used to sit at the foot of the stairs to kind of keep people from going upstairs. And so I always thought that Abdu'l-Bahá was sleeping or resting. Everybody did at that time. And we found out in 1956, when Baliulavaga came to America, what went on up there. And he said what actually took place was that Abdu'l-Bahá did not rest. He would get his secretaries in an oval. He would stand inside the oval, and he would go to the first one, and they would have letters to be answered. Abdu'l-Bahá would give him just enough dictation to keep him going, and then he would go to the next one and do the same, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And he would go around in a circle, and when he would come back to you, which was the first one, he would pick it up exactly where he left off and continue on around until the letters were answered. When you mention Abdu'l-Bahā's name, there's something about the magic of his name that touches the heart. His terrific spirituality, it was like a wall, a flame around him, you know, and you felt so humble in his presence. He never got mad. He never got upset. He would look at the good qualities of individuals. You know, there was a man that used to come out in Haifa and Acre it was, and spit on his face every day he went by. For 27 years this went on. And one day the man came to him and threw himself at his feet and said, "I must be wrong because you treated me so nicely for all this period of time." He was the perfect exemplar of the Baha'i faith. He represented the true man on earth with the love and the kindness and the justice and the honesty and the decency and everything that went with it. And of course, this is why people revered him. Now, Baha'u'llah said that if you have any questions after I am gone, turn to the Master. If there are any doubts in your mind, turn to the Master. He said if there is a conflict or a discussion, turn to the Master.
You weren't quite 2 years old when you met Abdu'l-Bahá.
That's right.
And you said that when you close your eyes, you can see him vividly.
Yes. That's right.
Would you share with us your thoughts and feelings and perhaps what you see when you picture him in your mind's eye?
Yes, I'll try hard, because for a small kid that small, I think the things that affected me more was being in the presence of Abdu'l-Bahá, but also what was happening to the people around Abdu'l-Bahá. And I think that when you're a small child like that, you're a tender soul and you don't have sophistication, and because you're affected more easily by it. But I know that when I used to play under his robe and look up at him, there was a tremendous attraction, as if I was always there. It was, it's so hard to explain. It's just that you were there. You were there with all the love, the affection, warmth, understanding, everything. And it was just like, I don't know what you'd say it was like. It's hard to explain. It's just that everything was perfect.
Abdu'l-Bahá, the servant of glory, the servant of God.